It is Connect Radio, and it's been far too long since we had this chap on. If you like your history, then you're in for a treat. In fact, if you don't like your history, I will stand by this and say that you will like your history by the time we've finished with this feature, because I wouldn't ever have said that I'm a history buff. But now, I'd say that I'm probably more qualified than Chris with all the museums that I've been to and all the features that we've done here. He is, of course, not just Chris, he's Dr. Chris, and you know your history, don't you? Just a little bit.
Well, I love history, so I'm learning new things every day, Gareth, and you teach me loads. You teach me different aspects of history I'd never even thought of before. Some of our conversations, they've gone in directions I never expected.
You see, this is why we need to go on a dig together, me and you, because you're so focused on the artifact itself, you may miss things around you because you miss out on the sort of the everyday man questions, I think, of like, why is the soil this colour? I always thought that soil was that colour, and you never know that it could be that colour because it leads you to a different artifact.
Yeah, but I'd be suspicious all the time, Gareth, that you're just getting me to dig some foundations in your garden for an extension.
Yeah, I can imagine
and your
that.
encouragement that the soil has changed colour would just be to get
there going.
Later.
Now, why don't you get the spirit level out and then we can get some concrete and we can put it down and we can see what else we can find around there. So,
I'd be happy to help.
Looking forward to this. Just before we do get started, because your prayer that you did for us about what's going on in the Holy Land at the moment, we're going to send that out actually on our mailing list later this week, because it's still something which, to be fair, Chris, it's not changed since we did that about a month ago, has it, sadly?
No, it hasn't. It's terrible circumstances. And, you know, I mean, somebody stopped me last week and they said, am I pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli? And let's not get drawn into that kind of polarization, right? We are, well, I'm pro-Jesus, but we're certainly pro-humans, right? And we care about the men and the women who are suffering on all sides. Now, I do think, as that prayer would have made clear, we need to be praying for the peace of Jerusalem. We need to be praying for the people of Israel. We need to pray for the Jewish people. And they're really threatened right now. But we also, of course, recognize the terrible suffering of the Arab people. Many of those Arabs, don't forget, they're Christian believers. They're brothers and sisters in Christ. Arab doesn't equal Muslim, you know. And so there's such a range of people in the Arab world and among the Palestinians. So, Gareth, let's keep praying for them all of them caught up in these troubles.
And I know this is probably the least of people's worries, but is it a safe place to go and visit at the moment? I mean, for example, you and your team, there's so much history over there. Do you think you'll be going over there anytime soon?
Well, I mean, there are still arrangements being made for next summer, archaeological excavations and so on. Right now, I'd say no. You know, at this point in time, I wouldn't suggest. And I think flights are quite restricted anyway right now. So now's not a time to be visiting Holy Land. This is a war. Okay, this is a war being fought. And the trouble right at this very moment is there's a lot of uncertainty about whether this could expand further. If it's contained, if the hostages are freed, if they can reach some kind of temporary resolution, long term, there are still going to be big issues, but there could be, you know, there could be some kind of settlement that would make travel in the new year, we're talking really, travel in the new year back to some level of normality. But the thing is, right now, I'm no prophet, and I guess you're not either. And it's just the uncertainty of what may happen next. So I wouldn't be encouraging people to make any bold kind of decisions about going out until we know a bit more clarity. It's that the fear here is that there's still possibilities for things to extend. At the moment, though, thank God, there does seem to be some sense of the Lord maybe constraining this, that it doesn't spill out with other surrounding nations. But, you know, it's a troubled part of the world. So, you know, at the moment, let's just keep praying. And plans for the future, let's keep them on hold for the moment and watch and see.
So we bring you on when we can, really. At the moment, you've been busy and have had bad health and all this kind of stuff going on. So it was meant to be a weekly feature, and hopefully it will continue to be a weekly feature. But we haven't had you on in a while, and we'd love to know what you've got for us this morning. Have you got an actual artifact you'd like to hold up, or is it just maybe a bit of information?
Well, it's a picture of an artifact. I wish I had. I wish I had one of these to actually show you. Right. So I'll ask you a very particular thing, Gareth, to help the listeners, and I'll see what you say. Okay. Just to say this, I will tell you right up front what it is. Okay. It's a signet ring. It's a little signet ring. Now, on my what it would be, the far right from me. Not sure which way around you're looking at it, but there's a photograph of the original signet ring. Which is actually quite hard to discern what's on it. There is a little picture and there is some writing on it. Now, what I would like, Gareth, is to help the listeners. On the left-hand side, the drawings often in archaeology are better to look at than the actual photos, because a drawing, the artist can draw out the details you can't see so clearly. And so can you see there's some letters around the edge? Now, these are Greek letters, and I know you are an expert in Greek. You don't tell people that often, Gareth, but I know you can.
I like to keep it secret, Chris. I'll be honest with
you.
you.
Well, you're modest, aren't you? You're modest. But if there's some Greek letters scattered around, and I'd love to see if you can take a guess as to who this ring once belonged to.
So the letters I see here is an O, a T, an A, and that looks like an upside down V. So I'm going to go with that could either be a V or it could be a U, unless it is a letter that's changed significantly in the last few thousand years, which of course is highly likely. But who it would have belonged to? Well, presumably it would have been of somebody of great importance. Maybe it would have been a Caesar. Maybe it would have. Am I close?
No, I mean you're close, but it isn't.
Okay, you're close, but it's not the right answer. So what we see here is a signet ring, and it's got those letters on it. In the middle, it looks like some sort of chalice, maybe. It looks like some sort of cup, maybe. And then to the right-hand side of that, I can't make head nor tail of it. It looks like something. Wow. It looks like.
Hey, tell you what. Well, there are more letters. Okay, there's more letters, so they're sort of going around in a curve. And I mean, you might help the listeners if you can describe the letter, the last letter. If you're going around it on the right hand side, the last letter. And remember, Gareth, this is Greek. Okay, so the letter's a little bit different than English.
It would look like. I guess it looks more like an M than it would any other letter. But then again. Yeah. I'm confused on this one, Chris, but if I have managed to describe it at all well enough, and if there's any history buffs out there who would like to get in touch and to tell me exactly what this ring is, I'd be very impressed if you can do it through what I've just described. But the number is 0161 511 9555. That's the WhatsApp number. And we'll be back in just a moment with hopefully the answer. This is Connect Radio. A load of these. I mean, it's a good job I can take a joke, because a few people have said it sounds like something that Del Boy would be wearing from Only Fools and Horses. And then somebody said, well, Prince Charles, of course, is famous for wearing a signet ring. Could it be some relation to him? Well, when you say relation, I mean, I guess we haven't ruled out the fact that it could be a royal who once had this ring. But here's the man who's got the answer. It's our very own Dr. Chris. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, Gareth. You did a good job of picking out some of the letters here. And they're not easy to read. And also, of course, they're Greek letters as well. So I'll tell you who it belonged to in a moment. But just to explain to you, this little signet ring, a copper ring, was found in 1969 on an archaeological dig just outside of Bethlehem in Israel, in West Bank in that case. And it was at a place called the Herodian. Now, this is a massive fortified tower palace built by, you guessed it, King Herod. King Herod, of fame in the Bible as the one who sought to massacre the children, the infants. So this is found at Herodian. Now, after Herod died, there's another important person who came to live there at the time of Jesus. It got taken over by somebody else, another governor. And that's who this ring belonged to. Now, when it was found in 1969, it's found like a lot of stuff on archaeological digs, really badly, encrusted with dirt. Nobody thought it was important. It got put in a box with thousands of other things that are found on archaeological digs. And it took decades before anybody thought to clean it and see what it was. And so in 2018, so you think how many decades that is later, they cleaned this up. Actually, I was born in 1969, by the way. So It's almost as old as me in terms of when it was found. And
Ancient, obviously.
when they cleaned it up, they found this is actually 2,000 years old. That is older than me. And the letters here. Now, I tricked you a bit because I said read the letters, but I didn't tell you which way they go. They actually start this end and go round. So they start from the right-hand side and go that way round, okay, right to left. And the first letter at the top there, which you thought was an M, looks a bit like an M. Actually, it's a Greek letter, and it's a letter you used in school in maths. Because when you had pi, 3.14, whatever, pi was a mathematical symbol, and they used that Greek letter because it's the letter P in Greek. It's pi, P. And that's the first letter. And then the other letters there, and you did pick out some, you're going the wrong way though, but P-I-L-A-T-O. You got the A-T-O there. P-I-L-A-T-O. And that's Pilato. And Pilato is the surname in Greek of Pontius Pilate. So this is actually the ring of Pontius Pilate that we know about in the Bible. Pontius Pilate is the governor at the time, of course, under whom Jesus was arrested and crucified. And Pilate had a ring, and he took over this place I've mentioned, Herodian, the tower built by King Herod. He used it as a palace. It was just outside of Bethlehem and looked out towards Jerusalem as well. And one day this ring got dropped. 2,000 years later, found by archaeologists. Decades later, before it got cleaned, nearly 50 years. And then when it was cleaned, it brought to life again the name of Pontius Pilate. You know, it's one of those pieces of evidence that shows when we read about these people in the Bible, they were real people, you know, with real history, with real fingers, who wore real rings. Before this was found, there was only one other inscription with Pilate's name. There was a stone found near the Mediterranean Sea with the name of Pontius Pilate on it from another building that he had erected for him. But this is the ring, the signet ring. And so it's a remarkable find. And it just makes me wonder, Gareth, what things are hidden away in boxes that have been found years ago that have yet to come to light because no one's had the time to clean them or take a closer look.
As you can imagine, I'm a bit of a media geek. And a friend of mine, his dad, this is a real long-winded link here I've got, but his dad used to manage loads of storage. So do you know how people, if they move house and they put things into storage? And there was famously in the area when ITV moved, so it used to be Granada, and when he moved out of there, he got a lot of the stuff that was sort of stored in this place. And ITV Granada must have forgotten it was there. And it got to the point where it had been there for like 20 odd years and nobody had sort of claimed it or anything. And I'll never forget, he was looking through it and there was literally, how they ended up there, I have no idea. But there was original Charlie Chaplin films and there was TV programs, lost episodes of things like Dad's Army, which they never knew. But then you start thinking, well, Dad's Army was never on ITV. It was on the BBC. So how has it ended up there? And I love these kind of stories, but I just want to ask you quickly, how do we know that that would have been the Pontius Pilate? Would there have been other Pontius Pilates who that could have owned to maybe?
No, I mean, Pontius Pilate was significant as a governor, and this was a palace. This was a fortified building that we know he did go on to occupy and to live in. So realistically, it's from the right period. It's 2,000 years old. He's the governor. This is his palace. No, there wouldn't be another Pilate to whom that would belong. I mean, that's one of the great things about the archaeology. This didn't turn up in a box, in a car boot sale somewhere, and nobody knew where it came from. Then you just don't know quite how old it might be or where it may have come from. But in this case, because it's archaeology, it was actually excavated. It was dug up. We know exactly the layer that it came from, the point in history where it would have been dropped, when it would have been in use, and that we know who this tower was being used by at the time. So the identification of Pilate is very, very clear here.
I think that is incredible. Genuinely.
Well, yeah.
I think that is absolutely the fact that why has he not been mentioned in mainstream media? Because surely that is an absolute incredible artifact.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, when we think about life of Jesus, here you've got a significant figure presiding over the crucifixion, the arrest of Jesus. And here we can actually look at a ring that may have been on his finger, or if not on his finger, it would have been on one of his servants. It would have been part of the Pilate household anyway. And so Pontius Pilate having this ring on his finger, what a remarkable connection to the story of Jesus.
And presumably that's kept in a different place than it was before they knew it was Pontius Pilate's ring.
Well, that's right. It's come out of a shoebox and it's now going to be going on display. I'm not sure where it's on display yet. I mean, I'm guessing this is going to be one for the Israel Museum because it's significant enough, but it's still fairly new in terms of its being, identified and so on. So quite where they display it. The Israel Museum, of course, is bursting full of things like this that you can go and see today. And something will have to clear space so they can make sure this has got a good display.
It's so good to have you back, Chris, because we learn so much when you come on. I'd have never have guessed that was whose ring it was. I thought you'd have said it was a distant royal. Just a final question. As you can tell, I'm quite excited about this, but I want to ask you, so you said it was made of copper, is that right?
Yeah.
Why would it have not have been made of something more precious than copper? Or was copper maybe a precious metal back then?
No, that is a really good question. Now, okay, if it was gold or silver or something, it would have been identified very quickly. In fact, it's copper wasn't so important. Copper's not as valuable clearly as a precious metal. And if it is gold, that would really be the bling you were talking about earlier. That would have been bling, and that would have been Pilate's bling or whatever. Being copper, that sounds much more like it's a workmanlike thing. So it's probably more to do with the fact that this is the kind of like this tower that I keep talking about is more of a functioning sort of office and working environment. And so probably the ring reflected something of more the kind of working life of Pilate and his household, rather than necessarily the show-off stuff that would have been worn in official ceremonies and when he's meeting up with local dignitaries. So yeah, you're right. It's not quite the bling that we might associate. But of course, the bling doesn't survive as well, because anything precious metal, people would probably have stolen it, melted it down long ago. We wouldn't get to see it. It's the fact it's fairly doesn't look that important is why it was presumably dropped, forgotten, buried for 2,000 years, and nobody even noticed it when they dug it up. So yeah, it's a really good point, that.
And I imagine it would have turned your finger green, like some metals do if they're not proper silver or gold. And dear old Pontius Pilate would have had this green finger.
That's right. The kind of like the beautiful stuff that's found. I mean, I know that ring does not look good. Anybody who watches some video, it doesn't look that attractive. We've got to say that. It's a very simple ring. The beautiful stuff is really, really beautiful, but it's so rare because people don't tend to drop the really beautiful stuff and forget it. That's the stuff that does tend to get stolen and reused and so on for money. The things that you'll find in your house, in years to come, the stuff that fell behind the sofa, and it might be really interesting to find things 20 or 30 years later, but it's going to tend to be an old biro pen or a 2p piece. It's not likely to be the really valuable stuff because you would have hunted that down if you'd lost it.
I'm sure there's a sermon in there somewhere, Chris.
Yeah,
it must be. Well, Chris, it's great to have you back. Thank you so much for your time on that. And we'll be speaking to Chris next week and having another little history lesson.